Hello. Thank you for joining us for this program, for this preview of the new Great Hall of Shells permanent exhibit at the Billy Matthews National Shell Museum and Aquarium. I'm Sam Ankerson, the director of the museum, and joined
I'm José.
by, sorry, go ahead,
Sorry.
Jose.
Yeah, I was just going to say I'm José Leal, the science director and curator. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you, Jose. And we're pleased to be with you and appreciate you joining from whatever time zone that you may be in. This is a Zoom webinar format, and for folks who haven't joined one of our online programs before or who aren't familiar with that format, if you would like to ask questions, and we hope you will, and we welcome them. The way to do that is to use the chat function by running your cursor along the bottom of the screen, clicking on chat, and typing in your question. And after our presentation, we will go to the chat room as it is and answer the questions. We have one more free online lecture scheduled this fall, and it is on October 17th, and it's on the subject of carrier shells. And the talk is being given by Gary Kidder, who is the collections manager at the Houston Museum of Natural Science and a great speaker. So if you're interested in that, you can go to the museum's website and register for that. So with that, we'll jump into our program. And Jose, if you could advance to the next slide, please. And we're here to talk about the Great Hall of Shells for Great Hall of Shells. For those who don't know firsthand what that is, the Great Hall is the historic part of the permanent exhibits of the Shell Museum. The museum opened in 1995, and with dozens of exhibits of shells from all over the world, put together by the legendary Tucker Abbott, who is the founding executive director of the museum. And over the decades, the exhibits were added to, revised, in places under the directorship of Jose and then Dory Hipschman. And what we see right here is a photograph of the Great Hall taken soon after Hurricane Ian, when because of damage from the storm, the um, space needed to be gutted, and there was damage to some of the exhibits. To next slide, please, Jose. This is how it looks today. It has been repaired and readied for the new exhibits that we will be installing, and that we'll be sharing some details with you about on this program. It's an amazing room, about 3,000 square feet in an octagonal shape with, as you can see, a soaring atrium, 30-foot high atrium, and at the top, an amazing set of sandblasted engraved windows by glass artist Luke Century that were commissioned for the original space. And it's right now, you see, it's a repaired, blank canvas for the new exhibits to come in. Next slide, please. And so very quickly, the project is a recuration and a complete redesign and reinstallation of the exhibits of the Great Hall. The motivations for doing so. One is in consideration of a trend that's been going on in natural history museums for the last several decades, in which collections of shells, of mollusks, while they may be remaining with natural history museums, they're increasingly going off of public view. There's a very notable exception to this, the Houston Museum of Natural Science, who we owe a debt of gratitude to for our plans and thinking about this project. But that's been the trend, and the museum, even before the Hurricane Ian, wanted to wanted to basically go in the opposite direction of that and really double down and um, and create exhibits that are contemporary, that celebrate these beautiful specimens of natural history with the latest and highest standard of exhibition methodology and production materials and lighting, and to work with the space to exhibit more shells than we were previously. The redesigned exhibits will be able to display about three times as many shells. Another motivation was to um, contemporize and broaden the educational impact and the kinds of stories and the material that we're covering in these exhibits. And what that means in the new exhibits, that means an expansion of the exhibits about shells as they have played important roles in human history and culture for hundreds of thousands of years, and also new exhibits on subjects of conservation and environmental topics as they relate to mollusks and shells. So wanting to bring forward these subjects to add to what will be um, larger and very, very beautiful exhibits of shells. So with this program, there will be kind of two parts. I'm going to hand it off to Jose in just a moment, who will run us through um, the shell focused, the shell heavy, as we say internally here, parts of the exhibits, and then afterwards I'll touch on some of the points of the history and the culture and the conservation and the environmental exhibits. You'll see a combination of, Jose, go to the next slide, please. You see a combination of what we call elevations or architect's drawings, renderings of the space. This is a pretty polished one. Not all of them are quite that way, but combination of images coming from the designer and images of actual photographs or maps or graphics that are going to be included in the new exhibits, and also some just some photos that demonstrate some of the process of what's going on. And the last thing I'll say before handing it off to Jose is um, we have a terrific design team working on this. The designer is a firm called Matter Practice out of New York City, with several decades worth of exhibit design experience for museums, including the National Building Museum, Cooper Hewitt Design Museum, the Norton Museum of Art in West Palm Beach, and many others, and a terrific group in Gainesville called Rawls Design, who is responsible for making all the dioramas, and there are going to be several new dioramas in the exhibit, as Jose will touch on, and then all the mounts, which for the thousands of shells that are going to be displayed. So, with that, thank you again, and I'll disappear here, and Jose will walk us through the first part here.
Thank you so much, Sam. Thank you everyone for joining today. I'll begin by showing a floor plan of the Great Hall and just outlining the sections that I'll be presenting to you. As Sam said, there are the shell heavy science related sections of the new exhibits. So basically we have different areas. We have exhibits that will radiate like the spokes of a wheel. We do have a central area, and we also have components along the walls. So let's begin with this section here, which will deal with some of the local themes, like, for instance, tree snails, the mangrove diorama, which is a blast from the past, is actually a section there that was kept as it was from the old Great Hollow shells. We also will have a completely new wharf diorama where we show, what we call in ecology the zonation of shells along man-made structures such as a wharf or a piling. So let's look now at the elevations, as we call, which is like looking at the exhibits, front side. We do have a relatively large area devoted to the seashells of Southwest Florida. Just to give you an idea, this section here, I hope you can see my cursor, is 19 feet long. We just finished the layout of that exhibit with a large number of local species and a large number of specimens per species to show variation within those species. Also, a part of the exhibit of Southwest Florida shells will involve a description of 6 habitats: offshore deep water ledges, oyster reefs, sandy beaches, man-made structures, mud flats, and mangroves. And under each one of those, we have examples of species that prefer to live in those habitats. And the whole idea with that exhibit is not only to educate about the local species, but cause an impression on the abundance and the amount of diversity we have in our area here in Southwest Florida. So this is an example of one of those 6 habitats. There would be evidently an image of a typical exemplar of that habitat, and there will be 9 species per habitat. In this case here, we're looking at the sandy beaches, animals that live just out of the local sand beaches. Next, moving to going in clockwise direction along the Great Hall. The Great Hall is an octagon, and we're going left here, clockwise. We do have a section on shell collecting that's very interesting. We talk about some of the early science done in Southwest Florida and some of the people involved in kind of jump-starting the hobby of shell collecting in the U.S. back in the mid-20th century. As Sam mentioned, we have a number of dioramas. This is a new diorama that's being made by Raymond Rawls and his business in Gainesville. Very well done. I've seen sketches, and we have something that I will show a little more detail next that I really like, which is a depiction of collecting sites in Southwest Florida. And here is a rendition of the wharf diorama with the zonation of species that you find in those structures. And that's what I was saying. I mean, it's a unique map with 23 hand-picked locations, the best shelling locations in Southwest Florida. We continue here. We have a photo of the mangrove diorama. We move now on to the land snail exhibits, beginning with the Cuban polymita, which is the painted snail that's one of the most eye-catching species in the world of pulmonate gastropods or land snails. We talk about Florida land snails at length, and we do have a very cool exhibition that we had before, which are 57 forms of the Florida tree snail, Ligius fasciatus, that were donated to the museum in its early years by the late Archie Jones, who used to work at the Everglades National Park. And then we have a section where we show the other Ligius species from the Caribbean, very colorful tree snails. This is a photo of, that little shadow box with the painted snails that was donated by De La Torre. Dr. De La Torre from Cuba was very close to American malacologists, especially very close to Bill Clinch from Harvard. And he gave this as a gift to Bill Clinch. And Tucker had that. Our founding director had Bill Clinch as his Ph.D. advisor. And Clinch gave this to Tucker Abbott. And it stayed in the museum. So that'll be added to the new exhibits. Those are the 57 forms of Ligus fasciatus. Few of those are now extinct. Their habitats were destroyed. They no longer exist. We continue here with the Florida tree snails diorama. I don't know, some of you may remember that in the old Great Hall of Shells, we did have a Florida tree with some land snails, tree snails, perched up there. We are redoing that from scratch. It will be a new tree with the Ligius snails on it. We've talked about other Florida land snails, not necessarily tree snails, but the carnivore species and the litter species and so on. We also have a kind of wake-up call. We have a section of the land snails exhibit devoted to the giant African snail, who is an invasive species, a pest that can be harmful to human health, and that has invaded Florida successive times and been eliminated and then came back. People bring them from other countries. It's been a big conservation/health problem. So let's move now, again, going clockwise direction, exploring this area here. We'll have a section that we call the extremes, and then the Florida fossils. And the extremes will include deep sea species, world records, and the micromollusks. So this deep sea diorama also is being made and will be a rendition of the ecology around a hydrothermal vent, which are spots in the bottom of the ocean where you have volcanic activity and water seeping out of the seafloor. And that water has chemicals that support those lush environments. So we have a little diorama displaying that. We have a cool section of micromollusks that I'll talk about that a little later. It's one of my passions, one of my areas of study in the old days. And here it is the elevation of that area. The Florida fossils will bring back the what we call the fossil tower that shows 4 different formations in Florida, meaning 3 different layers of the underground. Florida used to be on and off, invaded by seawater, and the deposits in Florida of shells and corals are huge. And we actually had shells brought. I actually went and collected some in the old days in those different areas. And the exhibit makers back then patiently glue them onto big blocks of styrofoam. And it's super realistic. If you haven't seen that, you have to come and check it out. We do have, continuing with the fossils, we have an area where we show Florida fossils and their modern equivalents, their recent, closest relatives. We talk about Ecphora, which is a special, very special group of gastropod snails, fossil only. And last but not least, we show our world record shells, which are, let's see, about 10 of them. and micromollusks. And for the micromollusk exhibit, we'll have images of micromollusks because they're really difficult to display, being that they are really small, usually less than 5 millimeters or 0.2 inch. And in there, we have a very cool microscope. That's also a completely new inclusion, a new addition to the exhibits. And it's a microscope, very sturdy. It's done especially for museum and institutional exhibitions. And we'll have 6 species from Sunnyvale, very, very small shells that the public can enjoy, after they turn on their little lights there. Continuing with, we have the deep sea species, the shells, in general explanation of where is the deep sea and at what depths we consider, the bottom of the ocean to be the real deep sea and so on. And then a global map showing the location of the species we're displaying. Species from cold seeps, whale falls, and hydrothermal vents. We do, again, I mentioned about the micromollusk exhibit. The diorama of deep sea mollusks is something I'm very excited about because it's looking really cool. You have to come and see it. And now going to the core, the geometrical center of the octagon of the Great Hall, the whole area, will include the exhibits that are really, really show heavy. So we'll have 6 standing shelf-like displays and 2 central crescent-shaped exhibits that are what we call the global distribution. And here we're including fantastic specimens of well-known collectible families. And I'll show you some of the materials that we'll be using for that. That's the rendition done with the actual photos of the shells done by our exhibit designer. Here, the volutes, the family Volutidae, in the beauty and diversity section, and carrier snails and murexes. So we selected a few families that are more striking. On top, scallops and cone snails and cowries, and surrounding all that, we do have 2 panels with global, cool shells under the titles of Time and Evolution and Sculptures and Collars. So this is all being, as Sam mentioned, all being done, prepared now by Raymond Rawls in Gainesville. This is an example of how the work is done. We pick up the shells and we know the dimensions of the case, the panel, the size of the panel. So we deploy the shells. We assign numbers to them. We take a picture, and then we pack all the shells, each one of them in a plastic bag with a ticket with the number and species name. And that goes to the mount maker, who will manufacture custom-made mounts for all of these shells. Here is our sculptures and collars selection, including shells from tropical seas all over the world. And next, we have the global distribution, where we try to explain, we are explaining how the current, the modern distribution of mollusks, and as a matter of fact, of any tropical marine animals, how it came about. So I'll play this little video. We'll have the same concept of the Earth, like starting at 200 million years ago, and the separation of the continents, that up to that point will consisted what we call Pangea today. And the existence of this big tropical ocean or tropical sea called Tethys, and how these species, colonized new areas, new oceanic or new sea areas onto the west, forming what we know today as the Northern and South Atlantic. You notice South America separating from Africa and Antarctica and Australia and India, what used to be Gondwana. And here, if you look closely, you notice that the Isthmus of Panama that didn't exist started forming and closed about 3.8 million years back. I'm really excited about that. They are doing a new rendition of this video with more in tandem with the style of what we're be displaying. I mentioned the separation of two marine areas by the Isthmus of Panama. So basically, what we had species that existed throughout that large seaway. Those species ended up separated by the Isthmus of Panama. So populations of the species on each side diverged. Their evolution led to different ways. The evolution of the different daughter species, if you will. And we have an exhibit where we are showing those pairs of species. Some of those species pairs, each member being the closest relative to each other, if that makes any sense. So in some of them backed up by genetic works. And I'm very excited about that section. And in between those two crescent-shaped exhibits, there will be a bench. And this is the other section on the global distribution with showing, tropical species from all around the world. So I'm really happy and very with the way this is going. I had my chance to play once again with shells. Here we are putting together the Isthmus of Panama species pairs, and the global distribution section. So at this point, I want to invite Sam to return, and I want to thank you for your kindness and for being here today.
Thanks, Jose. And that last picture he shows is about my favorite picture of Jose. It's at work creating. Thank you. So, all right. So I'm going to, since I'm at the museum, Jose is at home. So I'm going to look to bring up the slides. Just bear with me. Okay. Okay. Can we see that, Jose? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the exhibits as relate to the culture and history exhibits and conservation and environment. Before I sort of go off and do that, I'll say again, if you have any questions, please feel free to type them into the chat anytime, and they'll be there at the end of the program, and we'll get to them. So these exhibits are, so this is an area that, as I mentioned at the beginning, this is an area where we were really looking to expand the material that we were covering. So this list right here is the general subjects of the exhibits where we're focusing in on where shells have played a role. About half of them are new, and about half of them are taken or sort of updated from the prior exhibits. And these exhibits are and the conservation environment are quite a bit more sort of multi-format. There are shells involved and specimens involved, but also um, a large degree of photography, of video, of other kinds of artifacts, of maps and illustrations. So it's a bit more of a, as I say, multi-format. So I'm going to sort of touch on some stories we're telling within some of these exhibits. We don't have time to sort of go through all of them in full detail, but we'll just go through and touch on some of them and on some of the stories we're excited to be telling. This is an elevation, another example of one of the architect drawings, and it's showing the layout of two of the exhibits in this new section. One is on foodways and one is on medicine. But I wanted to include this slide to point out the kind of what I was talking about, that sort of combination of specimens and video, which is right here, and photographs and text and artifacts. This is actually an old menu from an old oyster house right there. But just to kind of give a feel of the blend of material that will be in this section of the exhibits. And we'll start with touching a little bit on the foodways exhibit. And some of the elements in this exhibit touch on the broad range of international cuisine and staples of of food in cultures around the world. Usually bivalves, but clams, mussels, etc. But also gastropods too, i.e. the conch. But from North South America, the Pacific, the exhibit will focus in on the full range of how mollusks have played into food around the world. These photos are of paella and steamed clams. A focus on the oyster house tradition I'm most familiar with the one in the Northeast. The Boston Union Oyster House, which has been open since 1826. These photos are of the Oyster Bar in New York City, which has been operating since 1913 and is still one of the busiest restaurants in the city. And the foodway section will also focus on aquaculture as the appetite for shellfish of all kinds and mollusks has increased and increased. Maintaining sustainable populations is, as in a lot of other areas, becomes a big challenge. But there are innovative aquaculture projects going on all over the world. On the left is a clam farm in the Solomon Islands, and on the right, a mussel farm in France. And the exhibit will spotlight aquaculture projects of different varieties happening all over the world. Moving on to shells and mollusks in medicine. So this is one exhibit that is new, that is not a subject that was covered previously, and there's some really interesting work that has come up in the last few decades. Mollusks, as being part of medicine, goes back several centuries, used in Murexes in particular, used in traditional medicine. But more recently, the scientist is Dr. Baldemaro Oliveira from the University of Utah, who from a species of cone snail um, derived a compound that is effective in blocking pain without the use of opioids. And so down the lower right, that's the medication that has come out of it. That's one story we'll be telling, but there are others where recent applications um, um, are leading to medicines, anti-inflammatory treatments, anti-cancer, and it's sort of an interesting new frontier for this field. Moving on to the Calusa culture, people who are familiar with the museum know that the Calusa occupied a central place in the exhibit. For those who don't know, the Calusa are an indigenous culture that lived in South Florida, particularly concentrations in Southwest Florida for thousands of years, and became the most dominant, powerful culture in the area, and was was so successful at living, taking advantage of the bounties of the local waterways and the coastal ecosystems, that they didn't need to rely on agriculture in the same way that almost all other native cultures did. And shells and mollusks were a huge part of their day-to-day life and culture. Of course, diet, but using shells for as tools, which is what this exhibit right here reflects. And we'll have some, if you can see the cursor over here on the left, we'll have some examples of hands-on, kind of touchable versions that the visitors can use. And so it's a very, very amazing culture that vanished from South Florida in the 18th century for a variety of reasons. But the Calusa exhibit that will come back, a new feature we're really excited about, are these large-scale illustrations by an artist named Merrill Clark, who is in Gainesville and very closely connected with the University of Florida and their archaeology and anthropology departments. And working from that material has a real gift for creating depictions of as Calusa of Calusa life as it may have been. Here's an example, and here's another. You know, part of the shell story with the Calusa is that they built great cities on shell mounds, and that what we're looking at right here is a depiction of the home, the lodge of a Calusa leader in the mid 16th century, built on a great shell mound. That and it was said that the combination of the, let's call it the plaza around the lodge and the lodge itself, could hold over 2,000 people, and there are still remnants of these shell cities locally in places like Pine Island and other places close to here. So it's an important story to tell. Moving on to another new exhibit focus, is that of adornment and fashion, shells in how people express themselves in their clothing. And what we're looking at right here is a picture of what are thought to be some of the oldest known um, pieces of jewelry. Basically, they're beads that are made from swollen NASA shells, about 140,000 years old, found in Morocco, and is demonstrating, as we'll see again when we get to the art, when we're talking about art, that shells figured into some of the earliest expressions of creativity. Tusk shells right here in the middle or tusk shells were used by um, Native American cultures and in their adornment. Yeah, moved into mid 20th century jewelry design. As far as jewelry goes, I mean, there's kind of countless examples of how shells have played an important role there. But what we're looking at there on the right is a brooch um, by the great Italian jewelry designer Fulco de Vendura. It's actually a lion paw shell with gold, diamonds, and turquoise embellishing it. And we will get into a whole focus on pearls, which will be a lot of fun for those who don't know the connection between pearls and mollusks. Pearls are gemstones that come from mollusks like like oysters and mussels. And there are natural pearls, and then for about the last 100 years or so, there are also cultured pearls or man-made pearls. But pearls, of course, are the epitome of high fashion. So there will be a focus on that, with including um, well-known figures and cultural references where pearls come to light, like Audrey Hepburn on the left, the great Vermeer painting, Girl with the Pearl Earring on the right. On the left here, Harry, the British singer, pop star Harry Styles, who is renewing the tradition that existed during the Enlightenment of men wearing pearls as adornment, and and it's not just pearls where shells and mollusks have come into high fashion, and we'll focus on that too. On the right, we see from a recent runway. These are cowrie shells that are constituting the headwear and the dresses of these models. I don't have a slide for it, but I know she's in this program, Joyce Mathis. For those familiar with the former exhibit and who know Joyce and her work with Sea Silk, there is going to be a new Sea Silk exhibit, including a new piece made by Joyce in this exhibit. So I don't have a slide, so I won't go on length about that. But for those who know what I'm talking about, you know what I mean, and we're very excited. And thank you, Joyce. Music. This is another new topic for us, and where music and mollusks meet mostly comes down to shell trumpets, which have been usually conch shells, but other kinds too, used as instruments for nearly 20,000 years. And there will have a focus on in traditional music and spiritual music, and also even in contemporary jazz music. There's a great artist named Steve Turre who plays the shells. So I this is a this I'm gonna play this right now, and this is a Peruvian musician named Tito La Rosa playing an ancient conch shell. It's really beautiful music. We've been having trouble sometimes with the audio on this, so I'm going to play this and ask if folks don't mind to let me know if you don't hear it. If you don't hear it, I'll move on to the next slide. And if you do hear it, I'll keep playing it. Okay, thank you for your responses. You didn't hear it. Sorry, it didn't work. It's beautiful. So that section will include a couple of audio stations and video stations where there'll be an opportunity to listen and to watch and to hear the different kinds of music that are made with shells, and also some specimens to give an idea of what kinds of shells are used. I'm going to talk next about architecture. Architecture as a subject was included in the prior exhibit, and we have expanded it a little bit. And here's an elevation for how this is looking right now. There's basically kind of two themes with architecture. One is shells being used in building materials in production and construction. Actually, on the right here, if you can see with my cursor, this is a great example. This is where Capiz shells have been used for a long time and still are used in the Philippines as I don't know about a substitute for glass, but kind of an alternative to glass used. And this is a beautiful window pane with Capiz in it. And then there's building materials, and then the next is shells as inspiration for architectural design. And we have some examples on the left is a mosque, an Iraqi mosque about 9th century with um, the local telescope snail shell that is its inspiration. The great Sydney Opera House in Australia, its close connections to the coxcomb oyster on the right. And the Solomon Guggenheim Museum in New York by Frank Lloyd Wright, who is well documented his love of shells. His grandson has um, written how most mornings when they were together, he would bring a group of shells down first thing in the morning and talk about them over breakfast, and they were an inspiration for his design. And for folks who have been to the Guggenheim, both outside this outside view and inside, it's very evocative of shells. And there's a green turban there on the right, which will be exhibited with that photograph. Moving on to sailors' valentines and art as a subject. These are both extensions and expansions of the exhibits that were there previously. Sailors' valentines, this elevation on the bottom of how that is going to be presented. That exhibit has been about doubled in size. Previously, there were three wonderful sailors' valentines that from the mid 20th century. But what's been added are two, and we're keeping those. And what's been added are two 19th century sailors' valentines. These two right here. So that's kind of when the tradition of making sailors' valentines started. And then two contemporary pieces in the middle. Is a amazing piece by Hideki Amuro, and David Rhine has donated a piece as well. So this is a section that we know resonates with a lot of people for a lot of reasons, and has a very interesting history. And so we're glad to be able to um, add material on the front end of the tradition, and also some of the best contemporary work. Art. So this is as I was saying with adornment, this is another area where shells have played in some of the earliest known um, forms of creativity. What we're looking at right here is about a 500,000-year-old fossil of a mussel that was discovered in Indonesia about 10 years ago. And on it are zigzag lines, of which there's a detail here. And this is one of the earliest known forms of human creativity or art, and made on a shell. So there will be a focus on this in the new exhibit, and other aspects of the story of shells and art. We'll touch on the European still life tradition in the 16th to 18th centuries, mostly in Western Europe, where as explorers and traders were coming back to from their travels to Europe, they would bring, among other things, exotic shells, which figured into lots of still life painting. This one by Adrian Court from 1698. And along with this, with examples of this, we actually will have arrangements of shells as they're reflected in the still life paintings. And shells make their way into modern art too. On the left is a Georgia O'Keeffe painting with a moon snail bright, front and center, and on the right, the great modernist photographer Edward Weston with a spider conch. And the exhibit will pull the narrative up to contemporary art as well. The art section also touches on literature, where shells have played a prominent role in poetry. And of course, this important stories everywhere, but maybe particularly locally, of Anne Morrow Lindbergh and her transformative book, Gift from the Sea from 1955, which takes shells as a point of departure for meditations on all kinds of philosophical questions, and it continues to be a bestseller. And Mara Lindbergh had a home on Captiva, and is so there's a local um, local local piece there as well. I want to move now to the briefly to the conservation and environment exhibits. All of these are new. These are um, new subjects for focusing on for the museum, and we were able to do it, wanted to do it after um, the Living Gallery, the aquariums opened in 2020, and then were rebuilt post hurricane. But the advantage of having that extra space downstairs for some of the material about biology of mollusks gave us some room in the Great Hall of Shells to focus on these important subjects. And this is where we see, many of the visitors who come to the museum are vacationing from elsewhere, and they come with an interest in shells, which is terrific. But then it gives us an opportunity to educate on some of these subjects. So these are the themes of this next, and I'm not there's not going to be a great deal on all of them, but I'll just touch on some of them. On invasive and introduced species, and for folks who don't know exactly what that means, that's when there's a species of life in a place where it's not meant to be, and it disrupts the ecosystem there. This is there will be a spotlight on the zebra mussel, which arrived in the U.S. from Eastern Europe in the 1980s. And on the left, you can see a picture. On the right, you can see the distribution map um, of where they are today. And it's the problem with the zebra mussel, or often with introduced or invasive species, is they crowd out or smother the food systems for the existing populations there, and that's certainly what's happening with the zebra mussel. Regional water quality is a major issue in Southwest Florida, and will be uh, um, we're creating an exhibit on that, and as it relates not just to mollusks but to marine life of all kinds, and to to the life and economy of where we live. Much of this material will be borrowed from a temporary exhibit some of you may have seen in 2021 that we partnered with the Sanibel Captiva Conservation Foundation on producing on water quality, and they are helping us also with this permanent installation um, as well. Some of the subjects. I mean, on the left, you're seeing a right off Sanibel, right off Lighthouse Point, the kind of what it looks like when the polluted water comes down the Caloosahatchee River because of water management strategies that aren't good for this area. And on the right, blue-green algae is something that also can be a major problem due to a variety of factors. But that'll be another focus, along with red tide and water pollution. So this is um, I think it's important to bring it to a broader audience. Climate change will be a focus as well. The impacts of climate change as they pertain to sea level rise, to habitat loss, corals in particular, and the potency of major storm events. Right here is a post hurricanean view. Ocean acidification is one other area in the section that will have an exhibit. And what this refers to is the basic dynamic is when there's more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which can result from a variety of sources, including fossil fuel burning. Through a step of scientific steps, the waters, the ocean winds up being more acidic. And what that means for mollusks and shells is that they can't the shells, the thickness doesn't grow to where it needs to be. Basically, it thins the shells. And this trend over time could have major consequences for mollusks and shells. And so what we're seeing right here, which will be part of the exhibit along with some other material, are some visuals from experiments that have been done and recently that demonstrate this. So on the left, so they're basically experiments that are relating shell thickness to acidity, and on the left you're seeing a netted dog whelk. The greener it is, the thinner the shell, and on the right is an Antarctic sea butterfly, and you can really see quite clearly there as the acidity is being sort of cranked up in the experiment, what happens to the shell. So we don't want to only focus on challenges in this section. We also want to exhibit stories of recovering habitats and ecosystems and successful initiatives and restoration initiatives. And just a couple of them, there'll be several, but a couple of them. One is in oyster reef restoration, of which there's a lot of great work happening in lots of places right here in Southwest Florida, being led by SCCF with the University of Florida and others. These are some images of that. Up in New York City, the Billion Oyster Project is restoring oysters to New York Harbor and up the Hudson River, and we'll be talking about that. One other project I'll mention is Queen Conch population and fisheries restoration in the Caribbean. So this is a project led by Megan Davis for about the last 20 years called the Queen Conch Lab, and it's working with local governments and communities in the Caribbean to grow, to nurture, to expand populations of the Queen Conch, which is essential to the marine ecosystem there, to food diets there, to the economy and fisheries. And right here, as you can see, the goal is to have a Queen Conch farm in every Caribbean country, and this is the progress, and it's growing all the time. So it's these kind of stories that we want to tell as well. So thank you very much for joining our tour through the new exhibits, and we appreciate your interest in the project, your interest in the museum, your support. I know this is this is a big project that has got a big price tag on it, and I know several people who have supported this project are on tonight's program, and we thank you, and we thank all of you who in any way you support the museum or participate in our programs. It contributes to the recovery, it contributes to the completion of this project, and what will be an even better museum once these exhibits are open. I know that anybody with even a passing interest in shells or natural history of this kind, it's going to be a really terrific experience. We just can't wait for it to open, and we appreciate also everybody's interest or patience, I should say, in in waiting for it. It's been a complex project, and we don't have a firm reopening date right now. It's these cases are under construction, the mounts are under construction, the curatorial work is nearly all done, but it's a very big project, and we're going as fast as we can, and we are going to open it as soon as possible. So with that, I'll thank you again, and go to the chat room here. Hi, Jose, and take a look what we got, and be patient with me here. Okay, Noah has a question. Will you display, quote, freak shells in the extreme shells section? I guess for you, Jose.
Actually, we're not. We consider doing that, but I think we had, some priorities. We only have so much space, so we opted for, the deep sea topic. We have a lot of great deep sea shells that are almost totally lacking from most of the major museums in the US. We have the world record shells that by themselves take up a lot of space, including horse conch, the West Indian shank, and so on. So no, we don't have the so-called freak shells.
Okay, Robert. Hey Robert, how are you? Good to see you recently. Has a question. From a display perspective, what are one or two of the most important things gleaned from other museums, such as Strake Hall in Houston? So thank you very much for that question. And Robert, as we're referring to, is the Strake Hall. So I mentioned the Houston Museum of Natural Science before as being an outlier amongst major natural history museums and continuing to exhibit shells. And not only do they continue to exhibit shells, they just recently did a full renovation, reinstallation of their malacology hall, which is called Strake Hall. And Jose and I and our exhibit designer went down to visit it in, I guess maybe spring of 2022. And it's amazing. I encourage all of you to go visit. And we were inspired by their staff's effort, but also their their approach to displaying shells as essentially works of art, which is the display that I'm sorry, which is the approach that we are taking as well. One, apart from that thematic piece, one specific thing we took away is you've got to display these things on a black background. We were sort of playing around with different colors and they just belong on black. And we were able to take some cues and lessons from them in terms of internal lighting for the cases to really, have them presented the best way they can be, and how to handle the labeling so that it's as easy as possible for a visitor to be looking at shells and then see what they're looking at, right? So they don't have to because it's sort of it's a bit of a complicated thing with all these specimens in a case, and um how are you making it as easy as possible for visitors to know what they're looking at. So we took some techniques from and some cues from their approach there. And their curator, Tina Petway, and collections manager, who I mentioned before, Gary Kidder, have just been have really been great advisors to us. And so we appreciate that question. Thank you. Okay, lots of can't hear it, can't hear it, can't hear it. Thank you all for letting me know we couldn't hear it. Sorry about that. You'll hear it when you come to the museum, I promise. Okay, well, lots of positive comments here, and we appreciate it. But one more question. Here we go. Oh, wait, maybe two. Eugene asks, will the museum be more resistant to another hurricane? Well, short answer, we hope so. But the steps we've taken include a flood panel protection system that's about 3 feet higher than the one we had before, to account for a storm surge of the magnitude that we had with Ian, and then some steps to reinforce and strengthen our roof and the way that's attached to the building that of course we hope will be effective. We hope not to face it, but those are the steps we took. Sally asks, will there be a Junonia exhibit in the Great Hall? Jose?
Yeah, well, we have two answers to your question. First of all, yes, we do have a series of Junonias of different sizes in the exhibit on Southwest Florida shells. So that one, check. And the second part of my answer to you is that we already have that in the living gallery on the ground floor. We have a growth series, the old growth series of the Junonia that we used to have up in the second floor, has been in public display in the living gallery ground floor since March this year. So yes, we have Junonias abound in the museum.
Yeah. Thank you, Jose. And that just building off that a little bit, for those who don't know, the living gallery, the aquarium galleries, we we in a similar way, we redid not the aquariums themselves and the marine life. That's all in the same place and mostly exhibiting the same animals as before. But all the supporting exhibits, what's on the walls, what is around the aquariums was redone. And part of that includes and the same kind of beautiful casework that we're going to see in the Great Hall. Part of that includes the exhibition of some shells in the living gallery, including the Gino Negro series, as Jose mentioned. Linda asked, will there be an elevator for handicap access? The answer is yes. Okay. I think that's we've come to the end of the questions. I want to thank everybody again for caring and for supporting and for joining the program. And we'll look forward to seeing you either at the museum or on the next online program or down the road. Thank you.
Thank you.